Get away from that door right now before I call the cops. You've been lurking around here looking suspicious." The command cracked across the yard just as Elijah Bennett slid his key toward the lock. Mrs. Harper stood on her lawn with her phone already raised, glaring at him like she'd caught a criminal immolearn the act. Elijah barely had time to turn before sirens ripped down the street. Two cruisers jumped the curb, doors flying open, officers rushing straight at him. "Hands where I can see them! Step away from the house!" one shouted, already treating him like the threat she'd described. Elijah went still, then slowly raised his hands. The front door hung inches away, slightly open. Inside, his briefcase sat just past the threshold. Closing papers, deed, every piece of proof he couldn't reach. Curtains twitched. Neighbors gathered, and the woman calling him suspicious had no idea she'd just aimed police at the one man with the power to destroy everything they thought they controlled. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. Late afternoon sun slanted across the manicured lawns of Briar Glen, casting long shadows over the expensive homes that lined the Virginia cul-de-sac. Evelyn Harper sat, ramrod straight, in her wicker chair, her thin lips pressed together as she watched the activity next door. Her eyes narrowed to slits behind her glasses. The moving truck had arrived an hour ago. Now a man, a black man, was carrying boxes up the walkway to the Johnsons' old house. Or what used to be the Johnsons' house. Martha and Bill had moved to Florida last month after 32 years as Evelyn's neighbors. "Humph," Evelyn muttered, her fingers tightening around her iced tea. The man wore a tailored blue button-down shirt, with the sleeves rolled up, pressed khaki pants, and expensive-looking loafers. She noted his confident stride, the way he moved with purpose and authority. "They dress nice now, too," she muttered to herself. "Criminals getting smarter these days." She watched as he set down a heavy box and wiped his brow with a handkerchief. Something about his posture bothered her, like he belonged here, in her neighborhood. The man looked up suddenly, catching her stare. He offered a polite nod in her direction. Evelyn deliberately looked away. She would not encourage whatever was happening here. When she glanced back, the man had reached the front door. He shifted the box to his hip and pulled out a key. A key! The nerve of him, acting like he had every right to be there. Something hot and urgent rose in Evelyn's chest. She set down her glass with a sharp clink and pushed herself up from her chair. "Excuse me," she called, her voice carrying across the perfectly trimmed lawn as she marched toward the property line. "Excuse me, young man." The man turned, key still in hand. Up close, Evelyn could see he was around 60, not young at all, with salt and pepper hair cut close to his scalp. Deep lines creased around his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. "Which contractor let you in?" Evelyn demanded, arms crossed. "I watch this neighborhood very carefully, and the Johnsons would never hire someone without telling me first." A flicker of something, annoyance maybe, crossed the man's face before it settled back into calm neutrality. "I'm not a contractor, ma'am. I'm Elijah Bennett. I own the house." Evelyn let out a sharp laugh. The sound was brittle in the quiet afternoon. "You expect me to believe that? I've known Bill and Martha Johnson for 32 years. I know who they would and wouldn't sell to." "And what exactly does that mean?" Elijah asked, his voice still even, though something hardened in his eyes. "It means I know the Johnsons, and they wouldn't sell to your—" She paused deliberately. "Kind." Elijah Bennett stared at her for a long moment. "Ma'am, I purchased this house legally last month. I'm moving in today. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "I don't think so," Evelyn said. Her hand was already digging in her pocket for her phone. "I'm calling the police." "That's unnecessary," Elijah said, setting down his box. "I have all the documentation." But Evelyn was already dialing, turning away slightly as she pressed the phone to her ear. 911. What's your emergency? Came the operator's voice. Yes, hello, Evelyn said, her voice suddenly trembling with manufactured fear. I need to report a break-in. There's a man at 425 Magnolia Circle in Briar Glen. He's trying to force his way into the Johnson house. I think he might have some kind of tool. He's very aggressive. Elijah's eyes widened. Ma'am, that is absolutely false. Evelyn turned away, lowering her voice. Please hurry. I don't feel safe. He's threatening the whole neighborhood just being here. When she hung up, she faced him again with renewed confidence. A slight smile pulled at her thin lips. The police will be here soon, she announced, folding her arms across her chest. They'll sort this out. Elijah Bennett looked at her for a long moment. Do you understand what you've just done? He asked quietly. You filed a false police report. I've reported a suspicious person, she snapped. The officers will decide what's true. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder. Elijah carefully set down the box he'd been holding. His face betrayed no fear, only a profound weariness and something that might have been disappointment. Evelyn stepped back to her own property line, a sense of righteous satisfaction flowing through her. The sirens grew closer, their wail splitting the peaceful afternoon. Now let's see what the truth is, she said coldly, watching as two police cruisers rounded the corner, lights flashing against the pristine facades of Briar Glen's exclusive homes. Two police cruisers tore down the quiet street, sirens wailing, and screeched to a halt in front of Elijah's new home. The sudden commotion drew curious faces from behind curtains and onto front porches all along the cul-de-sac. One by one, neighbors stepped outside, their expressions a mix of alarm and fascination. Officer Trent Pike burst from the first vehicle, hand already hovering near his holster. His partner, Officer Mason Doyle, followed from the passenger side, mirroring Pike's aggressive stance. Step away from the door. Now! Pike shouted, advancing up the driveway with swift, determined steps. Elijah Bennett remained perfectly still, his hands visible at his sides. Officers, there seems to be a misunderstanding. I said step away from the door. Pike cut him off, voice sharp with authority. Elijah took two careful steps back. This is my house. I just moved in today. Before he could continue, Evelyn's voice rang out from the edge of her lawn. That's not true. I saw him forcing his way in. She hurried toward the officers, her thin frame vibrating with righteous energy. He's been lurking around all afternoon, checking windows, testing doors. I feared for my life. Officer Doyle turned to Elijah, his expression hardening. Sit down on those porch steps. Keep your hands where I can see them. Elijah complied, lowering himself with deliberate slowness. His face remained composed, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Officers, my name is Elijah Bennett. I'm a federal judge. If you'll allow me to show you my identification— Federal judge? Pike scoffed. Let's just slow down there, buddy. My wallet is in my back pocket, Elijah continued calmly. My closing papers for this house are in my briefcase in the foyer, just inside the door. Pike crossed his arms. You're telling me to just let you reach for something? You think I'm stupid? Of course not. I'm simply trying to resolve this situation. Evelyn stepped closer, emboldened by the officer's aggressive tone. He's lying. I know the Johnsons. They would have told me if they'd sold their house to— She paused meaningfully. Well, they would have told me. More neighbors had gathered now, forming a loose semicircle around the scene. A woman across the street held up her phone, clearly recording. Look at him, Evelyn continued, her voice carrying across the lawn. So slick, so arrogant. Exactly the type who thinks rules don't apply to him. Elijah's expression didn't change, but his shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly. Ma'am, "Please step back," Officer Doyle said, though his tone lacked conviction. He turned to Elijah. "Sir, do you have proof of residence?" "As I said, my closing documents are just inside." "Convenient," Pike interrupted. "First you're a judge, now you've got paperwork just out of reach. What's next?" A middle-aged man with a graying beard stepped forward from the gathering crowd. "What's going on here? Is everything okay?" "Stay back, sir," Doyle ordered. "This is police business." More phones appeared among the onlookers. The quiet click of camera apps activating seemed to punctuate the tense silence. Elijah took a slow, measured breath. "Officers, I understand you're doing your job. I'm simply asking for the opportunity to prove my identity and ownership. My driver's license clearly shows." "I'll tell you when I want to see your ID," Pike snapped. "Right now, you're gonna sit there and answer my questions. How'd you get into this house?" "With my key," Elijah replied evenly. "Because I own it." Evelyn let out a harsh laugh. "Look at him, lying through his teeth." Pike stepped closer, towering over Elijah where he sat on the steps. "Let me make something clear to you. We got a report of a break-in. You're acting suspicious, and your attitude isn't helping." "I'm being entirely cooperative," Elijah said quietly. "You call this cooperative?" Pike leaned in, his face inches from Elijah's. Talking back? Questioning procedure? Making claims about being some big-shot judge? The crowd had grown larger. Someone muttered, "This isn't right." Another voice whispered, "Should we do something?" Elijah's hands remained visible on his knees. His expression remained composed, but something changed in his eyes. A hardening, a calculation. "Officer," he began, his voice steady, "I'd like to comply with all your instructions. Perhaps if you—" "Shut it!" Pike hissed. He jabbed a finger toward Elijah's face. "You move one more time without my permission, and you're going down." The neighbors watched in stunned silence. Some shook their heads. Others kept filming, their phones steady and focused on the confrontation unfolding on Judge Bennett's front steps. "Officer," Elijah said quietly, "I'd like to show you my identification now." Officer Doyle glanced at Pike, then nodded reluctantly. "Slowly. Keep your other hand where I can see it." "Understood." Elijah moved with deliberate care. His fingers inched toward the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The fabric rustled softly as he slipped 2 fingers inside. Pike's hand hovered near his holster. "Careful now." Elijah extracted a sleek leather wallet and held it out, his movements measured and precise. "My identification is inside." Doyle stepped forward, but Pike intercepted him, snatching the wallet from Elijah's hand with unnecessary force. The leather slapped against Pike's palm. "Let's see what we've got here," Pike said, flipping the wallet open. He pulled out the driver's license, holding it up to catch the late afternoon light. "Elijah Bennett," he read with a mocking tone. His lips curved into a smirk, clearly expecting the name to carry no weight. Doyle leaned over Pike's shoulder, peering at the ID. His eyes shifted from the license to something else tucked behind it. A credential card with an official seal. He reached over and carefully slid it out. "What's this?" Doyle murmured, studying the federal courthouse credentials. Pike barely glanced at them. Probably fake. But Doyle's expression had changed. He looked at the credentials again, then back at Elijah, whose face remained composed despite the humiliation of being treated like a criminal on his own property. "Sir, these indicate you're a federal judge?" Doyle asked, his tone noticeably different. "That is correct," Elijah replied evenly. "Recently transferred to this district." Evelyn pushed forward, her thin fingers gripping her cardigan. "Oh, please. Anyone can print official-looking cards these days. Don't let him fool you." "Ma'am, please step back," Doyle said, this time with more authority. He turned away slightly and spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, I need a verification on credentials for a federal judge named Elijah Bennett." While they waited for confirmation, Evelyn continued her tirade. Forged IDs are common these days. These people know every trick. She pointed an accusing finger at Elijah. I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. I know what belongs here and what doesn't. Elijah's jaw tightened. The careful control he'd maintained throughout the encounter was still there, but something shifted in his posture. He stood taller, his shoulders squared. I have tolerated this treatment out of respect for these officers' duty, Elijah said, his voice firm but measured. But I expect professionalism, not humiliation on my own property. The radio crackled. Dispatch to Unit 17. Doyle lifted the radio. Go ahead, dispatch. Verification complete on Elijah Bennett. He is indeed a sitting federal judge with the Fourth Circuit, recently transferred from Chicago. Confirmation came direct from courthouse administration. The atmosphere shifted in a single breath. Like a sudden change in barometric pressure before a storm, everything was different. Officer Doyle straightened immediately, his demeanor transforming. Pike took a half-step back, his face flushing red beneath his tan. Sir, Doyle began, his voice suddenly respectful, almost deferential. I apologize for the misunderstanding. Pike said nothing, but his posture had gone rigid. Evelyn's face drained of color. For one brief moment, she looked stunned, caught, but the expression vanished almost instantly, replaced by renewed indignation. Well, she huffed, folding her arms across her chest. How convenient. Elijah accepted his wallet back from Doyle but didn't pocket it immediately. Instead, he held it in his hand, a physical reminder of what had just transpired. This is outrageous, Evelyn continued, her voice rising. Using your title to intimidate decent people just trying to protect their community. A few neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances. The woman filming from across the street stepped closer. Judge Bennett, Officer Doyle said. Again, we're sorry for the confusion. We were responding to a reported break-in. A false report, Elijah corrected calmly. He's being manipulative, Evelyn snapped. Just because he has some fancy title doesn't mean he can bully everyone. I saw what I saw, Pike finally spoke, his voice gruff. Ma'am, I think it's best if you return to your property now. Elijah's gaze moved deliberately from Pike to Doyle, then to the neighbors with their phones, and finally to Evelyn. His expression remained composed, but his eyes held a clarity of purpose that hadn't been there before. This entire encounter will be documented, he said. The tension hung in the air like a physical weight. Phones continued to record the scene unfolding on what had started as a quiet afternoon in Briar Glen. Elijah's words, "This entire encounter will be documented," seemed to echo across the manicured lawns. Then, a voice broke through the heavy silence. I have it all right here. Heads turned toward the voice. A woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail stepped forward from the small crowd that had gathered. Lisa Grant wore blue scrubs under a light jacket, clearly just home from her shift at the hospital. She held up her phone, screen facing the officers. I started recording the moment Mrs. Harper left her porch, Lisa said, her voice steadied despite the nervous way she shifted her weight. She was already yelling before you all even got here. Evelyn's face darkened. What are you doing, Lisa? Officer Doyle looked at the phone, then at Pike, who seemed reluctant to acknowledge this new development. Ma'am, you recorded the initial interaction? Yes, Lisa nodded, stepping closer. I was watering my plants when I heard Mrs. Harper shouting. Something didn't seem right. Don't listen to her, Evelyn snapped. She's always been too nosy for her own good. Lisa ignored the jab and turned her phone so the officers could see the screen. Here. She pressed play. The video showed a clear view across the street. Evelyn marching across her lawn toward Elijah, who stood with a box in his arms. The audio was surprisingly clear in the quiet neighborhood. Who let you in here? Which contractor gave you those keys? Evelyn's voice demanded from the recording. I own this home, ma'am, came Elijah's calm reply. Liar! Evelyn's recorded voice shot back with venom. I know the Johnsons. They would never sell to your kind. Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Someone muttered, Jesus, Evelyn. The recording continued, showing Evelyn backing away while pulling out her phone. Her voice carried clearly. I'm calling the police. We'll see how long you stay around when they get here. Most damning was what came next. Evelyn's voice, loud enough to be picked up as she spoke into her phone. There's a man breaking into the Johnsons' old house. Yes, breaking in. He's aggressive and threatening our neighborhood. I don't feel safe. Send someone immediately. Officer Doyle's expression changed as he listened. Pike's jaw clenched tight. Lisa stopped the video. She called it in as a break-in when she clearly saw him using keys, and he never threatened anyone. You shut your mouth, Lisa Grant. Evelyn's face had gone from pale to bright red. How dare you spy on me? You're just a disloyal, vulgar little woman. Always have been. I just recorded what happened in plain view, Lisa replied, her voice quieter now, but still firm. Pike's radio crackled again. Dispatch was requesting an update on the situation. Turning against your own neighbors for some stranger. Evelyn continued, her finger jabbing toward Lisa. You're too stupid to understand what you're doing. That's enough, Doyle cut in, his voice sharp. The authority that had been directed at Elijah earlier was now aimed at Evelyn. Elijah turned slightly toward Lisa. Thank you for speaking up, he said simply. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Evelyn exploded. This is ridiculous. The whole street is being turned upside down for one suspicious man with fancy papers. She waved her arms wildly. What's next? Are you all going to roll out a red carpet for him? Throw a parade? A heavy silence followed her outburst. Elijah remained still, his expression controlled, but Lisa saw something flicker in his eyes. The insult had landed. The neighbors were watching now with open discomfort. What had started as neighborhood drama had morphed into something uglier, something that exposed fault lines none of them wanted to acknowledge. Officer Doyle looked truly embarrassed. He exchanged a glance with Pike, whose expression had transformed entirely. Pike wasn't looking at Elijah anymore. He was staring at Evelyn, anger evident in his rigid posture. But it wasn't anger on Elijah's behalf. It was the frustration of a man who felt a situation slipping from his control. Lisa held her phone tight, like a shield. I can send this video to you both, she offered. Doyle nodded. That would be helpful, ma'am. The sun was beginning to set now, casting long shadows across the once pristine scene. What should have been Elijah's first evening in his new home had turned into a public spectacle. Pike stepped away, turning his back to the group and speaking quietly into his radio. When he returned, he leaned close to Doyle and spoke in a low voice. We need to separate her, and ask this again. Pike and Doyle exchanged glances before turning toward Evelyn. The neighbors formed a loose semicircle, watching the drama unfold on what should have been just another quiet evening in Briar Glen. Lisa kept her phone up, still recording. Mrs. Harper, Doyle said, his tone now official. I need you to tell me exactly what you reported to dispatch when you called 911. Evelyn's shoulders straightened. I reported a suspicious person breaking into the Johnsons' house. That's what I saw. But you saw him use keys, Pike pointed out, his notepad now in hand. Well, yes, but… Evelyn's hands fluttered. He could have stolen them. Or made copies. And what did you tell dispatch about his behavior? Doyle pressed. I said he was… She paused, eyes darting between the officers. He was lurking around all afternoon, looking in windows, checking if anyone was watching. Lisa stepped forward. That's not true. My video shows him carrying boxes directly from the moving truck to the front door. Nobody asked you, Evelyn snapped. Pike held up a hand. Ma'am, please continue. Did you report that the suspect was threatening you? Evelyn's face flushed. Yes, he was threatening. The way he moved, the way he looked at me. How exactly did he threaten you? Doyle asked. He didn't say anything specific, but I could tell. Her voice rose. He was acting like he owned the place. Doyle's expression hardened. Mrs. Harper, he does own the place. A ripple went through the watching neighbors. Someone whispered something, and someone else hushed them. Evelyn's pride seemed to curdle before their eyes, transforming into something darker. Her face twisted. You don't understand what's happening here, she said, her voice shaking. This neighborhood was safe before he showed up. You think I don't know what happens next? Men like him move in, and suddenly we're all supposed to pretend we don't notice the danger. We're supposed to ignore our instincts because someone might call us names. Her words fell like stones into still water. The whole street seemed to freeze. Even Officer Pike winced visibly. Elijah Bennett stood perfectly still. He hadn't moved since the questioning began. He said nothing, but his silence carried more weight than if he'd shouted. His eyes never left Evelyn's face. Mrs. Harper, Doyle said carefully, are you suggesting that Judge Bennett represents a danger solely because of his race? Don't twist my words, Evelyn's voice shot up. I'm talking about property values, about safety, about standards. She jabbed a finger toward Lisa. Ask her why she's defending him. What's she getting out of it? Lisa stepped back, clearly shocked by the accusation. I recorded what happened, Lisa said firmly. That's all. Liar! Evelyn lunged toward Lisa, her hand reaching for the phone. Give me that. You've been recording me without permission. Pike moved with surprising speed, stepping between them. That's enough! Evelyn tried to push past him. She has no right. That's my privacy. Mrs. Harper, Pike said, his voice now cold and formal. Please step back and put your hands where I can see them. What? Evelyn froze, disbelief spreading across her face. Based on the evidence before us and your own statements, I'm detaining you for filing a false police report and attempting to interfere with evidence in an active investigation. This is insane. Evelyn's voice rose to a shriek. I called you for help. I'm the victim here. Pike reached for his handcuffs. Please turn around, ma'am. You can't be serious. She looked wildly around the circle of neighbors. James! Patricia! Are you going to let this happen? They're humiliating me in front of everyone. No one stepped forward. No one spoke up. This is your last warning, Pike said. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. With visible shock, Evelyn complied. The metallic click of the handcuffs seemed unnaturally loud in the evening air. Evelyn Harper, you are being detained for filing a false police report, Pike recited. You have the right to remain silent. As Pike continued reading her rights, Doyle turned to Elijah. Judge Bennett, I want to formally apologize for this incident. We'll need statements from you and any witnesses. Elijah nodded once. I understand procedure, officer. Evelyn was walked to the patrol car, still protesting loudly. You'll all regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with. I have friends in this town. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as Pike opened the back door of the cruiser. Just before she ducked into the car, Evelyn's wild gaze found Elijah again. The door slammed shut with finality, but through the glass, her lips formed 3 clear words. This isn't over. The summer sun sank low behind the expensive homes of Briar Glen, casting long shadows across manicured lawns. Porch lights flickered on one by one, like fireflies awakening to the coming night. But the usual evening quiet was missing. Instead, urgent whispers passed from house to house, growing louder and more distorted with each telling. Elijah Bennett stood in his new kitchen, surrounded by half-open boxes labeled dishes and cookware. The countertops were bare except for his wallet and keys tossed down moments ago. His shoulders slumped slightly, the first sign of exhaustion he'd allowed himself all day. Through the open window, fragments of conversations drifted in. But calling the police has to be more to the story. Harper wouldn't just make things up. He closed his eyes briefly and took a deep breath. This was supposed to be his fresh start. A place to build something steady after years of temporary apartments near different courthouses. A place that could eventually feel like home. The doorbell rang, startling him. His hand tensed automatically before he forced it to relax. Through the peephole, he saw Lisa Grant standing on his porch, holding a canvas tote bag and looking nervous. When he opened the door, she gave him a tight smile. "I thought you might need these." She pulled out several bottles of water and a container of what looked like homemade pasta salad. "Moving day is always chaotic, even without—" Her voice trailed off. "Without the police being called on you?" Elijah finished, his voice steady but tired. "I'm so sorry," Lisa said, stepping just inside the doorway when he gestured her in. "I should have said something sooner. When I first saw her watching you, I knew she was going to cause trouble. That's why I started recording, but I should have stepped in before it got that far." Elijah took the offerings and placed them on a nearby box. "You stepped in when it mattered most. That video might be the only reason those officers changed their approach." Lisa glanced around at the boxes. "Do you need help unpacking anything? I feel like I should do something." "You already have," Elijah said. "Standing up to a neighbor isn't easy, especially one like Mrs. Harper." Outside, voices grew louder. Through the window, they could see small clusters of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, some gesturing toward Elijah's house, others shaking their heads. "They're taking sides already," Lisa sighed. "The Millers and Jacobsons always follow Evelyn's lead. They're saying she was just being cautious, that the police overreacted." "Caution," Elijah repeated slowly, "is locking your doors at night. What happened today wasn't caution." Lisa nodded. "I know, but they're calling it that because it sounds better than what it really was." A sharp laugh cut through the evening air, followed by someone saying, "Well, I'm sure he's used to this sort of thing." Elijah's jaw tightened, but his expression remained controlled. He'd spent decades mastering this particular skill, hearing every cruel word while showing nothing. "I should let you get settled," Lisa said, moving toward the door. "Just know not everyone here thinks like Evelyn." "I appreciate that," Elijah replied. After Lisa left, Elijah moved methodically through the house, checking each window, drawing blinds, and finally settling in his study with a legal pad. Even now, habit took over. Document everything while it was fresh. Names, times, exact phrases used. The system had taught him long ago. Your memory alone is never enough. At the county jail, Evelyn Harper sat rigidly in a plastic chair, her hands shaking as she gripped the phone receiver. The processing had been humiliating. Fingerprints, a mugshot, her jewelry and watch placed in a plastic bag like garbage. Her carefully styled hair now hung limply around her flushed face. "Richard," she said into the phone, her voice wobbling between anger and tears. "They handcuffed me. In front of the whole neighborhood." On the other end, Richard Klein listened with growing interest. At 45, he had built his reputation defending clients who could afford his services and connections. More importantly, clients whose cases could attract the right kind of attention. "Tell me exactly what happened, Evelyn," he said smoothly, already opening his laptop. "I was protecting my home, my street." Her voice rose sharply. A man I'd never seen before was entering the Johnson house. When I questioned him, he was aggressive and dismissive. "And the police response?" Klein prompted, fingers typing quickly. "They turned on me, because he claimed to be some kind of judge. And that woman across the street, Lisa Grant, she was recording me without permission. They all ganged up, humiliated me in front of everyone. Me! A widow who's lived there for 30 years! Klein's fingers paused over the keyboard. A federal judge. This was better than he'd expected. High profile, politically charged, perfect for media coverage. Evelyn, he said, his voice reassuring now, I want you to know I'll represent you personally in this matter. We'll have you out tonight, and by tomorrow, we'll start changing the narrative. What do you mean? Evelyn asked. I mean, Klein said smoothly, that you won't stand alone. There are always two sides to every story, and yours hasn't been told yet. Not properly. Elijah locked his front door for the night, testing the handle twice. Old habits. Just as he turned away, his phone buzzed with a notification. He looked down to see a message from the Briar Glen community thread. Welcome to our newest resident. Perhaps introductions are in order since today's events were unfortunate all around. Below it, comments were already piling up. We've always valued safety in this neighborhood. Judge or not, shouldn't someone new understand our concerns? Evelyn may have overreacted, but she had good intentions. Elijah set the phone down without responding. The real battle hadn't even started yet. The morning sunlight slanted through half-unpacked boxes, casting long shadows across Elijah's kitchen. He sat motionless at the granite counter, his coffee growing cold beside his untouched toast. His phone screen glowed with notifications, each one worse than the last. Channel 8. News had posted their morning segment online. The video started playing automatically, Richard Klein's polished face filling the screen. What we have here, Klein was saying, his voice perfectly calibrated for sympathy, is a 72-year-old widow who has lived in that neighborhood for 3 decades. She saw someone she didn't recognize entering a home. She did what we tell our elderly to do. She stayed safe and called authorities. The anchor nodded with practiced concern. And she was arrested for this? Handcuffed on her own lawn, Klein replied, shaking his head sadly. Mrs. Harper wasn't acting out of malice. She was acting out of genuine fear. Our neighborhoods are changing. That's reality. And when a senior citizen feels threatened, should we punish her for it? Elijah's jaw tightened. The segment never once mentioned that he was the homeowner. Never clarified that Evelyn had lied to dispatch. The words federal judge appeared briefly in a caption. But the story wasn't about his credentials. It was about painting Evelyn as a victim. His phone buzzed again. An email from the Post requesting comment. Then another from the Tribune. Then a text from his daughter. Dad, are you seeing this stuff online? Elijah opened his social media accounts and immediately wished he hadn't. The comments were flooding in. Another black man playing the victim card when he could have just shown ID. Why destroy an old lady's life just because your ego got bruised? Who does this judge think he is? Too important to answer a neighbor's question? He set the phone down harder than intended, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. 30 years on the bench, and he'd never allowed anger to guide his actions. He wouldn't start now. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Elijah saw a thin courier holding a thick manila envelope. He opened the door and accepted the package marked Briar Glen Homeowners Association. Inside was a glossy welcome packet, community guidelines, and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Judge Bennett, on behalf of the Briar Glen HOA, welcome to our community. We pride ourselves on maintaining certain standards that have made our neighborhood desirable for generations. I'm sure yesterday's unfortunate incident was simply a misunderstanding between neighbors. I'll be stopping by later today to personally welcome you and answer any questions about our community expectations. Daniel Reeves, HOA President. The note's tone was perfectly pleasant. The message beneath it was not. Elijah was still holding the letter when another knock came at his door 2 hours later. Daniel Reeves stood on the porch, trim and smiling, in a blue polo shirt embroidered with the Briar Glen logo. At 60, his hair was expertly colored to hide most of the gray, his handshake firm but not aggressive. "Judge Bennett," he said warmly, "I hope I'm not interrupting your unpacking." "Mr. Reeves," Elijah replied evenly. "Please, come in." Daniel stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the boxes and furniture with quick assessment. "I wanted to personally welcome you," he said, "and to express our regret about yesterday's misunderstanding." "Is that what you call it?" Elijah asked quietly. Daniel's smile didn't falter. "Evelyn Harper has been through a lot. Widowed young, devoted her life to the school system. Sometimes her passion for this community comes across strongly. She lied to police dispatch and called me threatening." Daniel nodded sympathetically. "Fear makes people say things they don't mean. I'm sure as a judge, you've seen that." "I've seen patterns, Mr. Reeves. I recognize them quite well." Something flickered behind Daniel's eyes, but his smile remained fixed. "We're a close community here. Everyone looks out for each other. Property values have risen consistently because we maintain certain standards." "Standards?" Elijah repeated. "Exactly. Legal title to a property is important, of course," Daniel continued smoothly. "But being part of Briar Glen means embracing our community expectations. I'm sure you understand." The threat was wrapped in politeness, but it was unmistakable. Elijah met his gaze. "I understand many things, Mr. Reeves, including coded language." Daniel's smile tightened. "I should let you get back to unpacking. The welcome packet has all our guidelines. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other at the neighborhood functions." As Daniel walked down the front path, Elijah closed the door slowly. He didn't slam it. He didn't raise his voice. 30 years on the bench had taught him that rage needed direction to become justice. When he stepped outside later to check his mail, he found a bright orange violation notice taped to his mailbox. Violation. Unauthorized vehicle placement, moving truck angle, obstructs neighbor sightlines. Fine. $100 Saturday until corrected. Elijah stared at the notice. Dated today. Less than 24 hours after his arrival. Evelyn's voice from yesterday echoed in his mind. This isn't over. He looked down his street, at the neat lawns and perfect facades. Behind those windows, people were taking sides, creating stories, protecting what they believed was theirs. Elijah carefully removed the violation notice, folded it, and placed it in his pocket, not as trash, but as evidence. That afternoon, sunlight fell hard across the driveway as Elijah removed the HOA notice and read it twice in disbelief. The orange paper seemed to glow mockingly in the harsh light, its official letterhead and formal language barely disguising what it really was. Violation. Boxes visible through garage windows. Violation. Moving truck parked in driveway exceeding 6-hour limit. Violation. Lawn perimeter exceeding regulation height. 3.25 inches versus allowed 3 inches. Elijah's jaw tightened. He had been in Briar Glen less than 24 hours, and already the machinery of harassment had begun. The violations weren't just petty, they were impossible to have avoided during a move-in. No reasonable person would enforce such rules against a new resident. But this wasn't about reason. This was about making him feel unwelcome. Elijah slipped his phone from his pocket and began methodically taking pictures. The truck's position, the garage windows, the barely visible boxes, even the grass at the edge of his lawn, which he measured with the small tape measure he always carried, 3¼ inches exactly. Someone had been waiting with a ruler. This was not administration. This was intimidation disguised as paperwork. "Can I help you with something?" called a voice from across the street. A man in pressed khakis and a golf shirt stood watching, his arms crossed. Elijah recognized him as Gordon Wells from the HOA board photo in the welcome packet. "Just documenting a few things," Elijah replied evenly. Gordon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We take our community standards very seriously here in Briar Glen. Always have." "I can see that." As Elijah continued taking photos, Gordon made a show of dragging his own trash can across the street, positioning it directly on the edge of Elijah's property line. The metal wheels scraped loudly against the concrete. "Your can is across my curb line," Elijah pointed out quietly. "Is it? Hard to tell where the lines are sometimes." Gordon smiled thinly. "I'm sure the HOA will sort it out if there's any confusion." 15 minutes after Gordon disappeared inside his house, another orange violation notice appeared on Elijah's door. Violation. Sidewalk obstruction. The deliberate pettiness of it all made Elijah's stomach clench. He had faced bias in courtrooms, in legal circles, even from other judges. But this siege of paper cuts, this death by 1,000 regulations, was designed to exhaust him into retreat. A silver Honda pulled into the driveway behind him, and Elijah felt the tightness in his chest ease slightly. Naomi stepped out, her braids pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes tired from the drive from Baltimore, but alert as she took in the scene. "Dad," she said, embracing him. Her hug lingered a moment longer than usual. "I came as soon as I could get away from the office." "You didn't need to drop everything," Elijah said, though the relief in his voice betrayed him. Naomi's eyes caught the orange notice in his hand. "What's that?" "Welcome wagon," he said dryly, handing it to her. She scanned it, her expression darkening. "Sidewalk obstruction? Are they serious?" "Very." Elijah gestured toward Gordon's trash can. "That appeared 15 minutes ago." The complaint came 10 minutes later. Naomi's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the street. Curtains twitched in windows. A woman walking her dog crossed to the opposite sidewalk. A gardener who had been trimming hedges 3 houses down stared openly until Naomi met his gaze. "They're watching you," she said quietly. "They're sending a message," Elijah corrected. As they carried Naomi's bags inside, she spotted something tucked beneath a flower pot by the front door. A folded paper that hadn't been there when Elijah checked the mail earlier. She pulled it free. It was a neighborhood flyer, cheaply printed with the words, "Watch your street," in bold letters. Someone had underlined "watch" twice with a black pen. "This is harassment," Naomi said, her voice rising. "We need to report this. Get the police back out here, document everything, file counter-complaints, and validate their narrative that I'm the troublemaker?" Elijah shook his head. "Not yet. We document, we observe, we build a case, while they make your life hell?" Naomi's hands balled into fists. "You're a federal judge. You shouldn't have to tolerate this." "Precisely because I'm a judge, I need to be strategic," Elijah replied, his voice calm but firm. "These people want me to explode, to confirm what they already believe." Naomi studied her father's face, the careful control, the measured breaths, the tension around his eyes that most would miss. She had always admired his restraint, his dignity, but now, for the first time, she wondered what that restraint cost him. They walked back outside to retrieve the last of her bags from the car. The street was quiet now, but the weight of hidden eyes pressed against them. Naomi stood beside her father in the driveway and asked quietly, "How long have you been living with this kind of hatred in nice clothes?" That evening, surrounded by unpacked books and legal files, Elijah and Naomi sat at the dining table under a single lamp. The golden circle of light pooled around them, leaving the rest of the room in shadow. Outside, crickets chirped, a normal sound on an anything but normal day. Naomi pushed aside a stack of legal briefs to make room for her laptop. I've started a documentation file, time-stamped photos of the trash can, the violation notice, the flyer, everything. Elijah nodded, his fingers pressed together in a familiar pose that Naomi recognized from childhood. Her father, in deep thought. "Dad, talk to me," she said. "This isn't just about yesterday, is it?" Elijah's shoulders dropped slightly, the first crack in his perfect posture. "No." "How bad?" He met her eyes. "This isn't the first time I've been targeted outside the courtroom, but it is the first time it's followed me so openly to my front door." "What does that mean, targeted?" Naomi's voice sharpened. 2 years ago, after I ruled against a property developer with powerful connections, someone left a dead bird on my car in the courthouse parking garage. He spoke evenly, as if discussing the weather. "Last year, after sentencing in a corruption case, I received letters at my chambers describing my daily routine in detail. What time I got coffee, which entrance I used." "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" Naomi's eyes widened in shock. "Because I handled it. Security was increased. Protocols followed. And you just kept going? Like nothing happened?" Elijah's expression hardened. What was the alternative? To show fear? To let them win? Naomi pushed back her chair, her frustration visible as she paced the room. "There's a difference between showing fear and protecting yourself. This isn't just harassment anymore. It's escalation." "Which is precisely why we must be strategic," Elijah said, his voice still measured but firm. "Richard Klein isn't just Evelyn's lawyer. He's connected to half the power brokers in this county. He's waiting for me to lose my composure, to act out of anger rather than judgment." "So what? We just sit here and take it?" Naomi stopped pacing and planted her hands on the table. "You spent your entire career fighting injustice from behind the bench. Now it's at your doorstep, and you're, what? Filing paperwork?" The doorbell rang, cutting through their tension. Elijah rose slowly. That would be Lisa. He returned moments later with Lisa Grant, who looked nervously over her shoulder as she entered. "I brought the full video," she said, handing over a flash drive. "I also made a separate file with all the previous incidents I've witnessed with Evelyn." "Previous incidents?" Naomi's attention snapped fully to Lisa. Lisa sank into a chair, clasping her hands tightly. "Evelyn has made what she calls safety calls at least 6 times since I moved in 3 years ago. Always about people who weren't white." "Tell us," Elijah said quietly. "A FedEx driver who parked his truck suspiciously. A landscaping crew working late at the Wilsons. A teenage boy visiting his grandmother 4 houses down." Lisa's voice strengthened as she spoke. She called the cops on a family having a birthday party because the music was too ethnic. She reported a real estate agent showing a house because she thought he was breaking in. "Did anyone ever push back?" Naomi asked. "People tried. But she's lived here 30 years. She's on every committee. She knows everyone's business and isn't afraid to use it." Lisa looked down at her hands. It was easier to just avoid her. Naomi exchanged a look with her father. This wasn't just about one angry old woman. This was a pattern of behavior that an entire neighborhood had normalized. "Dad," Naomi said, "this changes everything. This isn't just about what happened to you." Elijah nodded slowly. "No, it's not. I have contacts at the Equal Justice Coalition," Naomi said, already typing rapidly. "They specialize in housing discrimination and community pattern cases. If Evelyn's been systematically targeting people of color with false reports, that's actionable." For the first time that evening, something like fire flickered in Elijah's eyes. "Lisa, would you be willing to make a formal statement?" "Yes," Lisa said firmly. "I'm tired of being quiet." The 3 worked late into the night. Lisa identified dates and victims of past incidents. Naomi drafted formal complaints, and coordinated with her contacts. Elijah assembled a meticulous legal framework, his judicial experience guiding their approach. By midnight, what had begun as personal humiliation had transformed into something larger, a documented pattern of discrimination that demanded institutional response. "It's ready," Elijah said finally, signing the last page of the complaint packet. Naomi scanned the documents, uploading them to a secure server. "My contact at EJC says they can file first thing tomorrow." As Lisa gathered her things to leave, they heard a car engine idle outside the house. Elijah moved to the window and carefully shifted the curtain. A dark sedan sat at the curb, headlights off. "Someone's watching the house," he said quietly. They waited in silence. After nearly a minute, the car's lights switched on, and it pulled away slowly. "They're trying to intimidate us," Naomi whispered. Elijah's expression remained unchanged, but his voice carried new resolve. "They've been doing this for years without consequence. That ends now." The next day, just after noon, Naomi and Elijah sat side by side in his half-furnished study. Books still lay in boxes against the wall, but Elijah had prioritized setting up his desk and computer, the tools of his profession now repurposed for his own defense. The laptop screen flickered to life as the video call connected. "Judge Bennett, Ms. Bennett, thank you for meeting with us today," said Marcus Washington, lead counsel for the Equal Justice Coalition. His voice was steady and confident even through the digital connection. Beside him sat Tanya Reeves, a case specialist with 15 years of civil rights litigation experience. "We've reviewed everything you sent." Elijah nodded. "Thank you for responding so quickly." "I wish I could say your situation was unusual," Marcus replied, his expression grim. "But the pattern here is painfully familiar." Tanya leaned forward. "Judge Bennett, the footage Ms. Grant recorded is damning. Not just for Ms. Eu, Harper's false report, but for how those officers treated you before they realized who you were." "Officer Pike had his hand on his weapon within seconds," Naomi said, "before my father even spoke." "We see it clearly," Marcus agreed. "And that's precisely why this case matters beyond just the false report charge. This is about how quickly force becomes the default when certain assumptions are made." Elijah's face remained composed, but his hands tightened slightly on the desk edge. "I've seen these patterns from the bench for years. It's different experiencing it firsthand." The meeting continued for nearly an hour, moving from outrage to strategy. The legal team outlined their approach. They would pressure the district attorney to maintain the false report charge against Evelyn while exploring potential civil actions regarding the police response. "There's something else," Naomi said, pulling up Lisa's sworn statement. "We now have documentation of at least 7 other incidents where Ms. Harper called authorities on people of color in the neighborhood for normal, everyday activities." Tanya's eyebrows rose. "This transforms the case from an isolated incident to a pattern of behavior. That's significant." A soft knock interrupted them. Lisa Grant stood in the doorway, looking nervous but determined. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. "I just wanted to drop off these." She handed Naomi a folder containing statements from 2 other neighbors willing to document Evelyn's history of targeted calls. "This helps tremendously," Marcus said, when Naomi shared the new information. "And we've had a development on our end. Officer Doyle's attorney reached out this morning." "Doyle?" Elijah asked. "The younger officer?" "Yes. He's indicated he may be willing to cooperate if this escalates. He's uncomfortable with how things unfolded and apparently has concerns about Officer Pike's conduct in other similar calls." For the first time since moving in, something like relief crossed Elijah's face. Not safety, he was too experienced to mistake momentary advantage for victory, but traction. The machinery of justice, which he had served for decades, was finally grinding into motion on his behalf. "The news outlets are changing their approach too," Tanya noted. 3 major stations have requested the original, unedited footage instead of relying on Klein's narrative. Even the neighbors are shifting, Lisa added. The Wilsons told me they're reconsidering their position after seeing the full video. And the Taylors actually apologized for not speaking up sooner. By evening, the tide seemed to be turning. Naomi received a text from her contact at the coalition with promising news. Richard Klein had quietly inquired about potential plea arrangements for Evelyn. He knows they're losing the public narrative, Naomi said, showing Elijah the message. He wants to cut his losses before this becomes an even bigger story. Elijah sat on the living room sofa, still surrounded by moving boxes, but somehow looking more settled than he had in days. Perhaps Evelyn will finally face real consequences for her actions. "We're turning the corner, Dad," Naomi said, her voice warm with cautious optimism. "People are finally seeing the truth." Elijah allowed himself a small nod. Justice takes patience. But I learned long ago never to count victories before they're secured. "Just take one moment to breathe," Naomi insisted. "One moment to hope." Elijah closed his eyes briefly, permitting himself that single breath of possibility. When he opened them again, he looked fractionally lighter. Later that night, Naomi sat cross-legged on the guest room bed, scrolling through news updates on her phone. Her expression suddenly shifted from satisfaction to shock. The color drained from her face. "Dad!" she called, her voice tight with alarm. "Dad, you need to see this." Elijah appeared in the doorway, a book still in his hand. Naomi held up her phone, her hand trembling slightly. "Someone edited the footage. They cut out everything Evelyn said, removed the context, and spliced in moments to make you look hostile and aggressive." Her voice cracked. "It's going viral. Hundreds of thousands of views already." On the screen, a heavily manipulated version of Lisa's video played, showing only fragments that completely distorted the truth. The comment section buzzed with outrage, directed not at Evelyn, but at Elijah. Naomi thrust her phone across the kitchen island, her hand trembling. Elijah took it and watched in rigid silence as the altered clip played through once, twice, 3 times. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes darkened with each viewing. "It's everywhere," Naomi said, her voice tight. "Twitter, Facebook, local news sites. Someone's pushing it hard." The edit was precise and poisonous. Every frame had been carefully selected to twist reality into something unrecognizable. Evelyn's taunts, gone. The officer's aggressive approach, erased. The neighbors witnessing, cut. All that remained was a carefully spliced sequence showing Elijah's face hardening, his posture stiffening, his voice rising slightly during that one moment when, after repeated humiliation, he had finally asserted his dignity. Presented without context, he appeared threatening, entitled, even aggressive. "Look at the comments," Naomi said, pointing to the screen. Elijah scrolled down and read, "Typical elitist judge thinks he can bully a scared old lady. This is the real story they tried to hide. Poor woman was right to call the cops. Look at how he acts." Naomi snatched back the phone and began typing furiously. "I'm contacting Lisa. We need to get the full video pushed back out immediately." "It won't matter," Elijah said quietly. "The damage is spreading faster than truth can follow." As if confirming his words, Naomi's phone buzzed with an alert. A local talk radio station had already picked up the story, their midnight broadcast questioning whether selective editing by activists had concealed Judge Bennett's true behavior. "It's not even been 3 hours," Naomi said in disbelief. "How did this spread so fast?" Elijah moved to his laptop and began searching. "It's coordinated. Look, the same accounts sharing it, the same talking points in the comments. This isn't organic." Naomi paced the kitchen like a storm in human form, her footsteps hard against the tile floor. This is Klein. Has to be. He knew they were losing, so they manufactured a new reality. As if summoned by her accusation, Richard Klein's face appeared on a news update. The attorney stood outside the courthouse, looking somber and reasonable in the glow of camera lights. "While I can't speak to who released this additional footage," Klein said, his voice measured, "I believe it provides important context that was unfortunately missing from earlier narratives. Mrs. Harper's response now appears quite understandable, given the full picture." "Full picture?" Naomi shouted at the screen. "It's the opposite of the full picture. It's a deliberate lie." Elijah said nothing, but his silence carried weight. As a federal judge, his reputation wasn't merely personal vanity, it was the foundation of his authority. And authority, once poisoned, was difficult to cleanse. "We need to make a statement," Naomi insisted. "Right now, tonight." Elijah shook his head. "Reacting hastily will only make this worse." "Worse? Dad, they're painting you as the aggressor. The news cycle is already shifting back against us." "I know." Elijah's voice remained steady, but the lines around his mouth deepened. "This isn't just about Evelyn anymore. Or even Klein." Naomi stopped pacing and stared at him. "What do you mean?" "This level of coordination means something larger. Look how quickly it spread. How perfectly timed the messaging is. This isn't just a neighborhood feud anymore." He clicked through several news sites, showing Naomi how rapidly the narrative had shifted. Publications that had been asking critical questions about police conduct and racial profiling just hours earlier were now running headlines about new video raising questions about Judge Bennett's conduct. "This is organized reputational warfare," Elijah said. "And these people are very good at it." The laptop screen illuminated his face in the dimly lit kitchen, casting harsh shadows that made him look suddenly older. The victories of the afternoon, the legal coalition's support, the changing public opinion, the possibility of justice, all seemed to dissolve like smoke. Naomi grabbed her phone again, scrolling through messages. "The civil rights group is already getting questions about whether they still support us. How is this happening so fast?" "Because they've done this before," Elijah said. "This wasn't improvised. They had this strategy ready." What hurt most was seeing how eagerly people accepted the distortion. The edited clip gave perfect cover to everyone who had wanted him discredited from the beginning. The neighbors who resented his presence, the officers embarrassed by their conduct, the community members uncomfortable with what Evelyn's actions revealed about their neighborhood. "I'm calling everyone we know," Naomi said, her voice rising. "News contacts, legal allies, social media people." "No," Elijah interrupted, his tone firm. "We need to be strategic, not reactive. Being strategic didn't stop this from happening." "No, but it will determine what happens next." Elijah closed his laptop with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than if he'd slammed it. He looked at Naomi, and the expression on his face sent a chill through the room. It wasn't anger or fear or even determination. It was something colder, something forged through decades of watching justice twisted and delayed, but never entirely denied. "This wasn't a mistake," he said with chilling calm. "It was built." The next morning before sunrise, Elijah was already dressed, reviewing timelines, screenshots, and property records at his desk. His desk lamp cast a small pool of light in the otherwise dark house. The coffee beside him had gone cold, untouched. Sleep had been a luxury he couldn't afford. Naomi found him there at 5:30 a.m., papers spread across the surface in careful piles. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I slept enough," Elijah said without looking up. His voice was clear and focused, showing no trace of the emotional blow from the night before. Naomi approached the desk. "What's all this?" "The beginning of understanding," Elijah replied, finally looking up. This isn't about defending myself anymore. It's about exposing what's really happening in Briar Glen. Instead of the reactive anger many would expect, the outrage that would feed perfectly into the narrative Klein had crafted, Elijah had spent the night mapping connections. He'd pulled property records, HOA meeting minutes, complaint histories, and legal filings. What emerged wasn't random hostility, but a pattern of coordinated control. "I need you to trace those accounts," Elijah said, pointing to a list of social media handles. "Find out who posted the edited clip first and how it spread so quickly." Naomi nodded, already pulling out her laptop. By 7 a.m., she had her first breakthrough. "Got it," she said, turning her screen toward her father. The first 3 accounts that shared the clip all follow the same digital marketing firm, Apex Consulting. And guess who Apex lists as a major client? Richard Klein, Elijah said, unsurprised. "Not just him. They've worked for Daniel Reeves's development company, too." Elijah added this information to his growing map. These aren't coincidences. The doorbell rang just after 8 a.m. Lisa Grant stood on the porch, holding a thick manila folder. "I couldn't sleep either," she explained as Elijah invited her in. "After seeing what they did with that video, I started asking around." She set the folder on the table. "These are complaints from service workers who've had run-ins with Evelyn and others in the neighborhood. Delivery drivers harassed. Landscapers reported to police. Cleaning staff accused of theft." Lisa lowered her voice. "And I found 3 families who moved out in the last 2 years. All minorities. All after sudden enforcement of violations they couldn't seem to fix." Elijah carefully reviewed each account. The stories were distressingly similar. Small infractions magnified into harassment. Police calls for normal activities. Sudden enforcement of rules that remained flexible for favored residents. "Did any of them file complaints?" Elijah asked. Lisa shook her head. Most were afraid of retaliation. One tried but was told it was a he said, she said situation without enough proof. "Because the system is designed to make proof difficult," Elijah noted, his voice hardening slightly. By midday, a more disturbing picture had emerged. Daniel Reeves's development company had bought 4 homes in the neighborhood after their owners faced harassment. Each time the properties were resold within months at significant markups to buyers who fit the preferred profile. Naomi made another connection. "Look at the dates of Evelyn's police calls," she said, comparing timelines. 8 of them align perfectly with HOA board meetings where potential buyers were discussed. She was the enforcer, Elijah concluded, the visible face of something much larger. Around 2 p.m., Elijah received a call from an attorney representing Officer Doyle. The younger officer wanted to meet, discreetly. An hour later, they convened at a coffee shop 15 miles from Briar Glen. Doyle looked nervous but determined. "I can't sleep at night knowing what's happening," he admitted. "Pike has been working with Reeves for years. When calls come from certain addresses in Briar Glen, they get special attention." He slid over printouts of internal messages. Pike's initial response to the call about Elijah was chilling. "Let's teach this guy a lesson about where he belongs." "Why are you showing us this?" Naomi asked. "Because it's wrong," Doyle said simply. "And because they're going to try to destroy your father's reputation rather than admit the truth." By late afternoon, Elijah returned to his desk with the full weight of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just about Evelyn's prejudice or Klein's manipulation. It was about a system, a carefully constructed architecture of exclusion and control that used everything from HOA regulations to police resources to property values as weapons. The problem was bigger than one angry woman. Evelyn was both perpetrator and symptom, a willing participant in a machine designed to determine who belonged and who didn't. Elijah spread the evidence before him: property records, testimonials, internal messages, social media analytics, violation notices with telling patterns. He began drafting motions, not just for his own vindication, but for a case that would expose the entire operation. "What are you thinking?" Naomi asked, watching her father work with quiet intensity. "I'm thinking," Elijah said, his pen moving steadily across the page, "that to win this, I cannot merely defend myself. I must expose the structure that protected her." By late afternoon, Elijah assembled a legal strategy broad enough to shatter Klein, Evelyn, and the HOA together. It wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about dismantling a system that had hurt many before him, people who hadn't had his resources or position to fight back. The papers before him represented not just his defense, but an offense powerful enough to bring accountability where it had long been absent. The following morning, the county courtroom filled early. Press, neighbors, lawyers, and onlookers drawn by scandal and power. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of curiosity and judgment as the room buzzed with whispers. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long rectangles of light across the polished floor. Evelyn Harper entered first, dressed in a modest navy dress with a white collar and a single strand of pearls. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, and she clutched a small Bible in her weathered hands. She looked like a church widow wrongfully accused, the perfect image of fragile respectability. But her eyes told a different story. They were flinty and furious, darting around the room as if recording enemies. Richard Klein strode in minutes later, his tailored suit and confident smile suggesting this was merely routine business. He nodded to reporters, shook hands with supporters, and arranged his papers with theatrical precision. His every gesture broadcast absolute certainty that the truth was malleable, that facts were simply opinions with better lawyers behind them. "We'll have this wrapped up by lunch," he murmured to Evelyn, loud enough for the first row to hear. The crowd shifted as Elijah entered with Naomi and the civil rights legal team. Unlike Klein's performative confidence, Elijah moved with genuine authority, composed but unyielding. He carried a single leather portfolio and acknowledged no one except the court officers. Naomi stayed close, her posture protective despite being nearly 3 decades younger than her father. Judge Martinez called the court to order, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "This hearing concerns the matter of Harper versus Commonwealth regarding the charge of filing a false police report and the related motion to dismiss. We'll begin with opening statements." Klein rose first, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "Your Honor, this case represents nothing more than an unfortunate misunderstanding between neighbors, one that has been grotesquely inflated into a spectacle. Mrs. Harper, a respected 72-year-old widow with 40 years of community service, acted out of genuine concern for her neighborhood's safety. That the man she reported happened to be a federal judge is irrelevant to her state of mind at the time." He paced slightly, his voice softening. "We have evidence showing Mr. Bennett's behavior appeared suspicious to any reasonable observer. Mrs. Harper deserves our understanding, not our condemnation." The civil rights attorney, Damon Washington, stood next. "Your Honor, what happened to Judge Bennett wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the visible portion of a systematic pattern of discrimination and harassment. Today, we will present not only the original unedited footage of the incident, but evidence proving that the viral video circulating online was deliberately manipulated to misrepresent the truth." The routine arguments continued for nearly an hour before the hearing shifted into sharper territory. Washington signaled his assistant, who queued up a large monitor. "Your Honor, we would like to present the complete unedited footage of the incident, alongside the dispatch audio and time-stamped metadata." The courtroom fell silent as Lisa's original recording played in full. Without edits, Evelyn's hostility was unmistakable. Her words clearly prejudiced before any interaction occurred. The dispatch audio revealed her escalating claims about threats that never happened. A digital forensics expert testified next, methodically explaining how the viral video had been altered after Evelyn's arrest. These timestamps and edit markers are conclusive. Approximately 16 seconds of Mrs. Harper's most inflammatory statements were removed, and Judge Bennett's responses were rearranged to appear unprovoked. Klein objected repeatedly, his voice growing tighter with each interruption. Speculation. Relevance. This technical jargon confuses the issue. Judge Martinez overruled him each time, her patience visibly thinning. Lisa Grant took the stand next, her nurse's scrubs exchanged for a simple blouse and slacks. "I started recording because I've seen Mrs. Harper do this before," she testified steadily. "She speaks one way to people's faces and another way behind their backs. That day, I heard her voice from across the street. She was already accusing him before the police arrived." Officer Doyle followed, his uniform pressed, but his expression uncomfortable. "We approached the scene with weapons ready because dispatch relayed threats that weren't occurring," he admitted. "Our department protocol was influenced by the address the call came from. Certain neighborhoods get different response standards." Klein's objections grew more desperate, but the damage was spreading. Then came the former residents, 3 families who had moved away after targeted harassment. Each described nearly identical patterns: sudden HOA violations, anonymous complaints, police calls for suspicious activity, all connected to Daniel Reeves and the Neighborhood Association Board. The week after we rejected the HOA's lowball offer on our house, Mrs. Harper called the police, claiming our teenage son was casing homes, testified Marcus Johnson, a former resident. He was delivering cookies for a school fundraiser. The courtroom mood had changed completely, from curiosity to disgust. People who had entered supporting Evelyn now sat with uncomfortable expressions, shifting in their seats. Klein stood again, his confident smile replaced by a tight grimace. "Objection! These alleged incidents are completely unrelated to the current matter. This is character assassination, not evidence." "Your Honor," Washington countered calmly, "these testimonies establish pattern and practice, which is directly relevant to Mrs. Harper's intent and state of mind." As Judge Martinez considered the argument, Evelyn muttered bitterly, loud enough for the front rows to hear, "They all stick together when they're trying to take over." The judge's head snapped up. "Mrs. Harper, you will refrain from commentary." Klein touched Evelyn's arm in warning, but the damage was done. Her words hung in the air like smoke. "Objection overruled," Judge Martinez declared. "The pattern evidence is admissible in full." Klein's shoulders sagged slightly as he realized the judge wasn't going to save him. For the first time since entering the courtroom, his confidence visibly cracked. He shuffled his papers, glanced at Evelyn with poorly concealed frustration, and turned to face the bench again. A man suddenly aware he was standing on quicksand, not solid ground. That afternoon, after a brief recess, the courtroom reconvened, with an electric stillness no one mistook for calm. Bodies leaned forward on hard wooden benches. Papers remained unshuffled. Even the usual whispers had died away, leaving only the soft hum of the ventilation system and the occasional clearing of a throat. Judge Martinez returned to the bench with a face that revealed nothing. She adjusted her glasses, arranged the papers before her with practiced precision, and looked up at the packed gallery. "Before I deliver my findings," she began, her voice clear and measured, "I want to remind everyone present that this courtroom is a place of law, not personal grievance. The evidence presented today has been substantial and troubling." Evelyn sat rigid beside Klein, her fingers gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She wore the expression of someone certain they were right, despite all evidence to the contrary. Across the aisle, Elijah sat with perfect posture, his face a study in disciplined neutrality. The judge cleared her throat. Based on the evidence presented, including unaltered video footage, witness testimony, and digital forensic analysis, this court finds the following. She looked directly at Evelyn. Mrs. Harper knowingly filed a false police report on the afternoon in question. She deliberately misrepresented facts to emergency dispatch, creating a potentially dangerous situation. She escalated the encounter with deliberate lies and interfered once the truth surfaced. Judge Martinez paused briefly. Her age does not excuse malice, nor does claimed fear justify fabrication. Evelyn's face flushed red, but the judge continued without pause. Furthermore, this court finds sufficient evidence to refer attorney Richard Klein for disciplinary review by the State Bar Association and possible criminal inquiry for distributing manipulated evidence and attempting to poison a judicial proceeding. Klein flinched visibly, his practiced composure finally cracking. Finally, the judge continued, based on the pattern evidence presented today, I am ordering Daniel Reeves and the Briar Glen Homeowners Association into immediate investigation for discriminatory enforcement practices spanning at least 5 years. The room seemed to exhale all at once, a collective release of breath no one realized they'd been holding. Reporters scribbled frantically. Lisa Grant closed her eyes briefly in relief. Mrs. Harper, Judge Martinez concluded, you will face criminal charges for filing a false report, with sentencing to be determined at a later date. Your bail is revoked effective immediately due to continued behavior that suggests you remain a threat to community harmony. That was when Evelyn erupted. This is insane, she shouted, rising from her seat despite Klein's desperate tug at her sleeve. The world has gone completely mad. Men like him, she jabbed a finger toward Elijah, ruin everything decent. He doesn't belong here. None of them do. Her voice cracked with rage. You're all afraid to say it, afraid to protect what we built. Now look what happens. A good woman treated like garbage for trying to keep her neighborhood safe. The outburst stripped away the final layer of pretense. Several spectators gasped. Others looked away, embarrassed or disgusted. The mask of concerned elderly neighbor had fallen completely, revealing the raw prejudice beneath. 2 deputies moved toward Evelyn as she continued ranting. You're punishing me for what everybody thinks, for what everybody knows is happening to our communities. It's not fair. It's not right. Klein had physically distanced himself from his client, sliding his chair several inches away. His face had gone ashen. Mrs. Harper, control yourself, Judge Martinez ordered sharply. You are in contempt of court. Naomi gripped Elijah's hand under the table, trembling with vindicated anger. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, not of sorrow, but of relief, of justice finally delivered. Elijah did not smile. He did not frown. He simply watched the system finally do what it should have done from the start. As the deputies reached Evelyn, she tried to shake them off, her dignity forgotten in her rage. Don't touch me. I did nothing wrong. Nothing any decent person wouldn't have done. Remove her from the courtroom, Judge Martinez ordered. The deputies took Evelyn's arms firmly but not roughly, guiding her toward the exit. As she was led out again, this time with no illusion of innocence, she turned her head toward Elijah, mouth open for one final barb. But he had already looked away, his attention focused on the papers before him, his expression revealing nothing of the storm that must have raged within. His refusal to engage, to feed her fury with his attention, seemed to deflate her more than any response could have. In that moment, the power dynamic that had defined their first encounter was completely reversed, and everyone in the courtroom could see it. 3 days later, on a bright Saturday morning, Elijah stood in his front yard with Naomi, a young oak sapling, and a shovel beside freshly turned soil. The sun cast long shadows across the lawn, painting everything in the golden light of new beginnings. "You sure this is the right spot?" Naomi asked, adjusting her gardening gloves. Elijah nodded. "Perfect visibility from 3 directions. This tree will grow to be seen." The neighborhood felt altered in ways both subtle and profound. Not magically healed, prejudice never disappeared overnight, but undeniably changed. The silence that had protected bias now felt uncomfortable to maintain. People who had looked away now found themselves unable to avoid seeing. News coverage of the hearing had spread well beyond local stations. National outlets picked up the story of a federal judge profiled in his own driveway, the false police report, and the coordinated campaign to drive him out. Briar Glen's reputation as an exclusive enclave had been exposed for what it truly was: a community where exclusion had been weaponized. Elijah pressed the shovel into the earth, each movement deliberate. This wasn't just landscaping, it was a statement. "Daniel Reeves left his resignation letter at midnight," Naomi said, holding the sapling steady. "Didn't even have the guts to face anyone, just slipped it under the HOA office door." "Pride rarely survives exposure," Elijah replied, digging deeper. The HOA's operations were frozen pending a full investigation. Property records going back 15 years were being reviewed for patterns of selective enforcement. 3 board members had already stepped down, claiming personal reasons that fooled no one. Most significant was the announcement that had come yesterday. The county was implementing new review standards for emergency calls and bias-linked complaints. Every report would now be scrutinized not just for accuracy, but for potential prejudice. Officers would receive additional training. Dispatch protocols would change. "Small victory," Elijah had said when he heard the news. "No," Naomi had corrected him. "This is exactly what big victory looks like. Policy change that outlasts emotion." Now, as they prepared the young tree's new home, Lisa Grant walked across the street toward them, carrying a watering can. "Thought you might need this," she said. "Oak trees need a good soak when they're first planted." "Perfect timing," Elijah said, stepping back from the hole. Lisa set down the watering can and studied the sapling. "Beautiful choice. These live for generations." "That's the idea," Naomi said, with a smile. They weren't the only ones outside that morning. Other neighbors had emerged too, some pretending to check mail or trim hedges, others watching openly. The Thompson family from 2 doors down approached hesitantly, their 10-year-old daughter carrying a small potted plant. "We thought, maybe we could add this to your garden," Mrs. Thompson said awkwardly. "We should have said something that day. We're sorry we didn't." Her words were incomplete, but real. Not asking for absolution, but offering acknowledgement. Elijah accepted the plant with a nod. 3 more neighbors came over during the next hour, each interaction stilted, but necessary. Apologies weren't perfect, but they were beginnings. Others stayed behind curtains and closed doors, forced at last to live with what they had defended. Some would never change, but now their silence cost them something it never had before: community standing. Lisa helped Naomi hold the young oak upright, while Elijah carefully lowered it into the freshly dug hole. The 3 of them worked together, packing soil around the root ball, creating a small ridge to hold water. "You know what I love about trees?" Lisa said, patting down soil. "They don't care what people think. They just grow where they're planted." The act was simple, deliberate, and impossible to miss. Elijah was not leaving, not shrinking, not granting this place the comfort of his disappearance. This wasn't just landscaping. It was reclamation. Naomi watched her father straighten, dirt on his hands, dignity intact. She had spent her life seeing him navigate spaces not designed to welcome him. But this was different. This wasn't survival. It was triumph. "Water?" Lisa offered, lifting the can. "Please," Elijah said, stepping back to watch the soil darken as she poured. The tree stood barely 4 feet tall now, slender, vulnerable in its youth, but its roots would spread wide and deep beneath the manicured lawn of Briar Glen. Years from now it would tower over the street, impossible to ignore. Elijah brushed soil from his hands and took a moment to survey his property. His home. 3 days ago, he had been a target. Today, he was simply a homeowner planting a tree. He looked down the street that had once treated him like an intruder and said, "Now they'll have to remember who planted roots here." If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.